Hello, welcome to Conspiracy Classroom. Today's lesson. Some of the world's most dangerous bankers look to consolidate power while placing one of the most powerful nations and its citizens in crippling debt, all while revolving around an unsinkable ship, a famous passenger liner. Things are not what they seem. They are all around us. This is today's conspiracy.
In the early 1900s, America stood at a crossroads. A fierce debate gripped the nation whether or not to create a central banking system, a system that would concentrate the financial power of the United States into the hands of a few private institutions. It would come to be known as the Federal Reserve. Some of the country's most powerful financial elites that were in favor of it consisted of J.P. Morgan, Paul Warburg, and Jacob Schiff. They believed a central bank would stabilize the economy, but critics warned it would hand over American sovereignty to private bankers. Senator Aldrich called for a secret meeting to take place on Jekyll Island, away from the eyes and ears in Washington, to discuss and later create the blueprint for our Federal Reserve. So a plan was hatched to wrestle control and power away from the opposition and eventually sign into law a shadow that would be placed over this country until today. President William H. Taft opposed the idea during his presidency, but after losing re-election, the door opened for Woodrow Wilson, a man whose ties to Wall Street were already quietly forming. We've heard that before. This would lead to Wilson later signing the Federal Reserve Act into law in 1913 after promising banking reform, which was anything but, and continues to draw fierce debate. But before that day would come, something strange happened. A series of events too perfect, almost as if waved into existence like a conductor in control of his band. In 1912, the RMS Titanic, the most luxurious ocean liner ever built, sold as being unsinkable thanks to its innovative hull design, prepared for its maiden voyage. On board for this fateful journey were the three men who had most vocally opposed the formation of the Federal Reserve. They were Benjamin Guggenheim, a mining magnate, Isidor Straus, the co-owner of Macy's department store, and a former U.S. congressman. And lastly, John Jacob Astor IV, a financier, a real estate mogul, and possibly the richest man in the world. They were not only vocal critics of centralized banking, they were strong enough and influential enough to stop its formation and block the United States from joining a World Bank. They, along with many prominent individuals of the day, boarded the Titanic for its inaugural trip across the Atlantic. A who's who of early century celebrities, business tycoons, heads of industry, and politicians were all expected to be on board. Conveniently missing, though, was J.P. Morgan. He, who had personally financed the Titanic's parent company, White Star Line, and was expected to be there, canceled his ticket at the very last minute, despite having reserved a lavish suite and having his luggage already on board. He later suddenly claimed he was ill. He was spotted relaxing in a French resort with his mistress only days later. And he wasn't the only one. Several individuals involved in the pro-Federal Reserve debate also declined or canceled tickets. One must question their timing. Now, on to the crux of the conspiracy. The Titanic wasn't the only ship of its kind. It was part of a trio of Olympic-class luxury liners, the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. The RMS Olympic, for which the line was named, launched a year before the Titanic, both ships nearly identical. But its record, like the Titanic, was disastrous right from the start. On September 20th, 1911, the Olympic collided with the British warship HMS Hawke while leaving the port of Southampton. The collision tore a massive hole in her starboard side, flooding compartments and damaging the keel. A second incident struck when the Olympic collided again, this time with a tugboat while maneuvering near New York Harbor. Though not as devastating, the damage was costly. While under repair, White Star Line's insurers refused to fully cover the damages, citing negligence by the now notorious Captain Edward Smith. He, who had a long history of mishaps at sea, including earlier collisions and groundings. He was allegedly told this would be his final voyage before his retirement. Yet, he who was considered reckless was so trusted by the elite passengers and by White Star Line herself. He was the perfect candidate. He was a patsy. Smith would go on to captain the Titanic and ultimately go down with the ship. So 2 major accidents, no insurance payout in sight, and now a crippled ship and possibly an opportunity. The White Star Line is now in financial trouble, so a plan was hatched. They would switch the damaged Olympic with the brand new Titanic, which was still being fitted at Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast. A plan so dastardly, who would believe it? The ships were so similar, it was feasible. They had the same dimensions, nearly identical layouts, and easily interchangeable nameplates, fittings, and fixtures. So the story goes, they swapped the names, furniture, lifeboats, repainted the doors and windows, and changed every other identifying bit. Then launched the Olympic under the Titanic's name, intending to scuttle it in the North Atlantic away from prying eyes. For the insurance money, of course. With this inside knowledge, another, more evil plan, one with even further reaching consequences, was secretly being passed. Along with purposely trying to sink the ship, they would make sure any opposition to the bankers' globalist agenda would go down with it. But it had to be done quick. According to many who would later speak up, and confirmed by a fireman named J.D. Johnstone, the Olympic, ever the curse, reportedly had a fire that had been burning in a coal bunker deep in the ship since before its departure. This weakened the steel bulkheads on the starboard side and caused serious structural issues. And this is exactly where the iceberg struck. They couldn't radio beforehand or use any other communication that would tip their hand. The plan included sharing their course and a rescue ship, which never arrived. The Californian, suspected to be part of the operation, and the designated rescue ship, was within visual distance, yet never responded. The Carpathia eventually arrived, but it was hours away. This was due to incorrect location, poor visibility, lack of standardized signals, amongst many other factors. The collision with the iceberg occurred at 11:40 p.m. on April 14, 1912. The crew, expecting a slow process, didn't anticipate the rate with which the ship would sink. In less than 3 hours, of the 2,224 passengers aboard, over 1,500 died. Of course, including Astor, Guggenheim, and Strauss, just as planned. They were now gone, and the opposition to the Federal Reserve went with them. Along with the White Star Line now being able to fully collect the insurance on what was thought to be a brand new ship, which happened upon an act of God. In December 1913, with little resistance, the Federal Reserve Act was passed during a holiday recess, with many legislators absent. President Woodrow Wilson then signed it into law. Years later,
This story, nay, conspiracy you've just been told, has been whispered, spoken in secret, and theorized well before the search for the Titanic yielded any results. Though once found, one must wonder what secrets will be revealed.
In keeping with White Star tradition, both ships had their names engraved into the upper bow plates in letters 4 foot high. Examination of the wreck and the name Titanic shows that it is made of iron letters which have been riveted onto the original bow plates. With the passage of time, 2 of the letters have dropped off and been lost forever in the sediment of the seabed. At the place where they once were, engraved into the hull, are the letters M and P.